Okay, so we're going to do this. This has to be done. Okay. So we have an article here by Dr. Ciara Kelly. A doctor. What is it that in the minds of Irish people gains most trust, especially from previous generations? Who is it? Who was it that they always wanted their children to be, and who are seen as the most trustworthy in society? Okay? Who are they? Who did you always want your kids to be? What would you have liked your kids to be? Well, it's usually a doctor. In the past, it was a doctor, a lawyer, or a priest. These are the things, these are the people that we saw as the most trustworthy in our society, or at least that we had to place our trust in order to survive in when you were sick, when you had legal issues, or when you had spiritual and religious issues. Okay, so we're going to do this. Here's the article, okay? It's in the Sunday Independent, and it's by Dr. Ciara Kelly. The shocking sights in Ethiopian refugee camps should shame those protesting here into silence. Shame those protesting here into silence. So, last year, 2018, we took in 12,000 Brazilians and 7,000 Indians. Okay? Those people got in here through loopholes such as work visas, English college language studies, and then onto work visas, and the work visas just keep getting renewed because Leo Varadkar wants to fulfill his Ireland 2040 plan. His Ireland 2040 plan is, he says there'll be an extra 1 million people in the country. How are we going to have an extra 1 million people in our country by 2040? Is it through natural birth rates? Well, I highly doubt that, seeing as we voted in abortion and that most young Irish women now want to mother cats. So how is he going to get the extra 1 million in? And how is he going to do it so that the native Irish population is not going to complain, oppose, or dissent against? How is he going to do that? Well, through loopholes, of course. Now, let's get on with the article. Now, remember, you must feel shame that there's a lot of people suffering in Ethiopian villages, okay? Remember that now. Shame. Feel shame, right? We've seen some strange scenes on the street. That was the opening, right? That's the opening in the article. See it there? I don't know if that's backward in the video, I don't know. But in the very opening bit there, the bit there, the actual, the bit that gives the start to the article is the shocking sights in Ethiopian refugee camps should shame those protesting here into silence, writes Dr. Ciara Kelly. We'll go on with it. We've seen some strange scenes on the streets of our capital over the past few weeks. Nazi salutes given by people calling themselves patriots. Well, we know there's already been about 3 or 4 people who put up videos on YouTube showing that the guy was a plant. And that's not just covering it up. The guy was walking up and down with his backpack on. Nobody knew him. None of the patriots who were standing outside of Google knew him. None of them. They all bumped into him. They'd not him. He was walking in front of the group, up and down, looking into the opposing anti-Google protest, free speech protest. He was looking. He was walking in front of the Patriot side, the Google side, where the Patriots were protesting against the stopping of free speech by Google shutting down Gemma O'Doherty's channel. Okay, this guy was walking up and down, looking into the other side, looking for something, and he'd walk from one end up to the other and back down again. Then, when he saw what he wanted, what he was looking for, he stood back up into the Google side and did the Nazi salute. Okay, now there are videos showing that online. There are videos showing that. So I'm not just saying it to cover up, oh, one of our side did a Nazi salute and it's terrible, and so I better cover it up. No, there are videos with circles going around the guy in slow motion showing that. I'll link them below so that you will see yourself. And it's up to you whether you believe if you want to take the time, or whether you just want to keep believing what you're fed in the mainstream media. That's up to you. That's up to you. Keep believing what you're told, and this will be India or Africa in another 30 years, and the Irish will be a minority. and because of your age, you might still be here, you may not. It may not bother you. You may feck off and leave the country because you've never had any an ounce of patriotism or love for your country to begin with. So here we go, right? But those of us who do love our country, who will still be here, want to see it Irish and for the Irish still to be a majority in their own homeland. Okay? So let's do this. Nazi salutes given by people calling themselves patriots, indeed counter-protesters in fancy dress with colourful flags dancing in the face of it all. Who knew the main enemies of the fledgling alt-right? Like, she's got all the keywords. Alt-right, Nazi, you know? Like, it's almost like they have a dictionary where they just pull these things out, you know? All right, so like the fact that you want your country to stay Irish or to stay majority your people, your own people, right? You're alt-right. Amazing, isn't it? You're alt-right if you want, like every other country in the world who wants their people. Pakistan, who wants to stay majority Pakistani. Are they alt-right? Is Ethiopia, we'll go back to the Ethiopians, right? Who are in the refugee camps, right? We'll say, are they alt-right if they want a country to stay majority Ethiopian? Are they alt-right? How does this work? Because I'm confused. Because I'm Irish living in Ireland and all my ancestry is Irish and everyone I grew up with was Irish. And I want the country to stay Irish. I'm alt-right? Let's move on. And indeed, counter-protesters in fancy dress with colourful flags dancing in the face of it all. We knew the main enemies of the fledgling alt-right movement here would be unicorns and rainbows with a question mark. One of the recurrent themes the alt-right harks back to is immigration. The idea that we are being flooded with foreigners who, according to them, appear to be both taking our jobs and sponging off our social welfare system at the same time. Well, let's see. 1/3, this is official numbers and statistics now. 1/3 of people in social housing in Dublin, 1/3 are not Irish. In the capital. Is that a desirable thing? So there's no issue with immigration, but now 1/3, within the space of a few years, 1/3 of our capital is 1/3 Irish. And in towns like Longford, the native Irish have gone below 50%. And I'm not supposed to say a word about that or I become alt-right. Right. So one of the recurrent themes of okay. They are drawn to the they are drawn to the white supremacist. She pulled out her dictionary again. They are drawn to the white supremacy. Do you know where all this is thought, ladies and gentlemen? Do you know where this idea is thought? This idea is thought in women's studies and gender studies. They teach this ideology. They teach the idea of white supremacy, they teach the idea of Nazis, they teach the idea of identity politics, of intersectional feminism. They teach all these ideas in women's politics. And I guarantee you this woman has had more than her fair share of those courses. So because you're white, you're an oppressor. This is cultural Marxism. Because you're white, you're an oppressor. Because I'm male, I'm an oppressor. So your immutable characteristics make you what you are without even your whole character, your actual position in society, your actual state of financial being. None of those things are taken into account. The fact that you have pale skin, you're Caucasian, you're white, and you're male with a penis, okay, and all the male characteristics, all right, you're an oppressor. That's cultural Marxism. That's intersectional feminism. That's where we're at today. And this woman is bringing that ideology from America, from cultural Marxist America, not all America, from the kids who've gone up through the universities being taught by Marxist professors that cultural Marxism, there's a whole thing about cultural Marxism, I've talked about that in the past. I'm up to 9 minutes here, geez, I hope I have enough. Hopefully I will anyway, so we'll keep going. The current themes, the alt-right, they are drawn to the white supremacist idea of white replacement theory. The idea that white people, who in the main, let's be honest, are the most powerful people on the planet. Not necessarily. Jewish people seem to have a lot of power. They own all the media. They own CNN, they own NBC, they own Hollywood, they own, and can you argue that Jews are white? I don't know. I mean, Judaism is a religious belief system. There is more than one ethnic group which claims Judaic association, you know? You have the Ashkenazi, who are Europeans. They're not Semites. So you can't be anti-Semitic towards Ashkenazis because they're not Semites. Their language is their own, the base is I think it's Yiddish, which isn't a Semitic language, you know? So, yeah, the Jews own Hollywood. They own Netflix, they own Facebook, they own WhatsApp, they own Instagram, they own all of Hollywood. They own the Federal Reserve in America. Are Jews white? Sometimes they are and sometimes they're not, depending on the situation. So I'm Caucasian, I'm white. I don't see the Irish ruling the world. Let's move on. They're drawn to the white supremacist narrative, who in the main, let's be honest, are the most powerful people on the planet. And again, that idea that white people are the oppressors, that's the whole thing that she's alluring to here. Right? That white people are oppressors to the rest of the world because the rest of the world is darker in skin. Okay? It's absolute rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. It was Britain and France that ended slavery in the Middle East. They put pressure on Saudi Arabia in the 1950s to end slavery. It was white people of white descendants in America who ended slavery, okay, through Christian beliefs and Christian morals. And also it was to do with the automation of farming and textiles and industrialization. And actually the use of manpower was holding them back. And also too, there were slave owners who were black. And also too, it was a tiny percentage of people at that time who had slaves. Okay, let's move on. And some slaves were treated so well by their owners that they actually spoke with very fond memories of the time of being slaves at that time because they had everything they could ask for. But they were obviously they were workers. They were slave. Not all. Some were treated incredibly bad. I'm just saying that it wasn't all one thing. All right, so here we go. White people who in the main, and that's what's taught in women's studies, is that slavery is just one thing. Okay. Oh Lord, are being somehow wiped up as a race by others of various other races. Well, we are. We're being flooded with every ethnicity and any ethnicity into Ireland at the moment. As I said, there's some towns which are now below 50% native Irish. So what are you talking about? And they seem to believe our largely homogenous Irish population is somehow in imminent danger of becoming extinct. Well, if the present trends continue, that will happen. It reminds me of when men's rights activists, now she's on about men's rights. So you see, do you understand? Cultural Marxism is race and gender. Marxism, oppressor and oppressed through race and through gender. And that's cultural Marxism. And every talking point she brings up here has been race and gender. This woman is a product of women's studies and gender studies. Reminds me of when men's rights activists whine that men are somehow obliterated somehow by feminism. Well, they get the rough end of the stick when it comes to things like family court law. Okay, that's a fact. And also too, young men are being disenfranchised because their role as the income earner has been undermined by feminism and cultural Marxism in the West. That's a fact. So more men actually are being undermined by feminism. Very good. So she illustrates that herself. And it illustrates very clearly how there's that word, equality again, Marxism. Equality feels like an erosion or attack when you come from a position of true privilege. Well, I hope she talks to the poor Irish now of the 10,000 that are homeless on the streets of Ireland, and she goes and tells them that they have true privilege. I hope she does that. But back to immigration, we have relatively small amounts here. Relatively small amounts. Good Lord. As I think most people can see, oh God, it's like she's inverting reality. Like, you walk through Cork, I can't even, I'm constantly hearing other languages. You know, when I go to sit outside the cafe, one of my favorite cafes for tea here in town, 3-4 days a week, there's Eastern Europeans up and down the length of the benches speaking their own language. So how are we having relatively small amounts of immigration? But back to, okay, most of it comes from within the EU, sure, but how many people are getting into the EU from non-EU countries? Okay, Eastern Europeans have been coming here for the last one, yeah, well, that was all arranged. Construction industries, yeah. No, there was no, as I always say, there was no encouragement of Irish families to actually make more Irish babies like they do in Hungary now. And among non-EU nationals, the CSO says we have a net immigration of 20,900 in 2018. Hardly, yeah, but that's not covering illegals and loopholes. Hardly a massive figure in a population of 4.6 million. It's definitely not 4.6 million. We're somewhere up at the high 5 millions, I'm sure. It is this last group, the alt-right, most incensed by. I can only infer it is because they are racists. You can only infer that if you have a problem with immigration, you're racist. So you can't speak up and say, I want this country for my own people. I want it for the Irish people. I don't want it for everybody else. Because if you do, you're a racist. Oh, Lord. I'm not long back from Ethiopia, you should stay there, where I travelled with a charity goal to see the work its volunteers are doing on the ground there in refugee camps. Violence in South Sudan over the past 6 years has resulted in thousands of refugees fleeing. Very good, fleeing. She's got a Christ complex. What is she doing out in those countries? They have adults. They have surrounding countries. They have countries that surround them. We as Europeans are not their parents. It is not our job to actually take care of Africa. We're not their parents. They have adults in those countries. They have neighbouring countries, which also, if you think about it, have responsibility, if you want to think in those terms of responsibility, to the people in the countries neighbouring them. So why are we way over here in Ireland taking on the responsibility of adults in other countries? It makes no sense. Violence in South Sudan over the past 5-6 years has resulted in thousands of refugees fleeing the region and entering Gambela in western Ethiopia. Okay. To give you some kind of context, the native Ethiopian, to give you some kind of context, the native Ethiopian population of Gambela is 400,000, and there are almost 500,000 South Sudanese in camps there. In fact, in all of Ethiopia, there are 3 million displaced people. And Ethiopia wasn't exactly a wealthy country to start off with. Right, okay. I spent days in the camps, walking around, talking to the refugees and the gold workers, and saw some of the scenes I saw, and the people I met will stay with me for the rest of my life. Well, yeah, that's good, okay, fine, yeah, but you know, you could always move out there and stay with them, and you won't have to miss them. So I've been to Western Africa, Central America, and Southeast Asia previously. I worked in a rural hospital in Java as a medical student, so I thought I knew what poverty looked like, but nothing prepared me for Ethiopia. Well, you're actually pushing situations and events which will create Ireland to be in the same situation in the not too distant future. There are levels of poverty and desperation I was lucky enough not to have seen before. Okay, I met women covered in scars from bombs going off, okay, in their village, and I met women who had lost children and I had no idea that what had happened to them. Did you know that the average IQ coming out of Africa is 85? That's a scientific fact. Do you know the average IQ of the Irish is about 97? The average now. We're not talking about, there's very smart people and very dumb people in all racial groups. But there are differences between homogenous racial groups, okay? The average among Irish people is 97. The average among white Europeans is 100. The average among Asians, such as North Chinese and Koreans, Japanese, etc., is about 105 or 110, I think. And there's some study about the Ashkenazi Jews being very high as well. But that was a, what was it? It was done on children, and it was done a while ago, and it wasn't given full credence. So I don't know whether it was just levels of G or whether it was IQ, I'm not sure which. But anyway, so the point is that to enact a democracy, to enact a high trust society, especially, and there's things to do with high trust society as well. Europeans have high trust societies because they have to overwinter. Overwintering means you have to trust your neighbour. And when, like we're thinking now, like today is the way it's always been. It's not. When you have to grow crops, when you have to farm animals, when you have to hunt animals, when you have to forage, when you have very hard, cold, icy winters, to survive and overwinter, you have to forestall gratification. and you also have to trust your neighbors, which creates high trust societies. Okay? So did Christianity, by the way. Christianity, because of its 12 commandments, because of the 7 deadly sins, because of that moral code, we learned and evolved to trust each other in our societies. In tropical climates and close on tropical climates, you have food all year round. So you don't have to forestall gratification. And it creates evolutionary strategies that are more immediate and less having to overwinter. Okay, so IQ mixed with the ability to forestall gratification, have high trust, as an evolutionary strategy, as a being, you know. In averages, again, not all individuals, but on average, you know, there's such a thing called averages when you take the entire group, and this creates an issue when you mix the two, and when you try to take responsibility for other groups. So, to give you some kind of context, the native. Yeah, Gambler. In fact, all of you are right. So that's what I'm talking about. We say when it comes to other countries like in Africa, where they never created social and economic structures and systems which allowed for the comfort and well-being of the entire group, and they only got that when Europe colonized them and brought these things to them. Okay. All right, everybody keeps harping on, and that's another thing that's taught in women's and gender studies, by the way, is that colonialism was a bad thing. Right, and again, the oppressor oppressed. And yes, there was an awful lot of atrocities caused by individuals and certain individuals who were part of the colonizing factors of these countries. But overall, these countries got things like science, medicine, social structures, central heating, if needed, if it's in certain cold parts of the country, obviously penicillin, medicine, Western medicines, engines, you name it, you know? They got the whole thing, like. And yet we're still to be fucking guilty. White people are to be guilty for colonialism. If they can't do something with that, we the Irish, right, we gained our independence in around 1916 to 1928, and we did something with it. We created a high trust society. We created a society that was worked and benefited everybody to a greater degree than lesser within the society. We didn't war with each other. I know you can talk about the North and South, but that's ethnic and religious conflict. That's another issue. So let's see, what else we got here? Okay. So in the years of nowhere, I met a woman who had left 4 children to fend for themselves across the campus. She's constantly trying to make you feel bad, like shame, 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 shame. Women and shame, you know. So I met a woman who had 4 young children to fend for themselves across the camp in their hut because they had a baby critically ill with malaria. Oh, I feel so bad. And with malaria, and that she had to stay with and feed in an NGO compound. The worst place I saw was the transit camp, the place where those refugees first arrived when they walked the 50-kilometer across the South Sudanese border. If there's a hell on earth, that place is it. The refugee camps are basic, thousands in huts and tents. So what's going to happen when they all know that Europe is looking after them? Where do you think they're going to come? When they get, it's like social welfare, being dependent on social welfare, and you develop a culture whereby you expect everything for free, and you expect other people to look after you. Where do you think all of the people in Africa who have learned to depend on European medicine, European science, European aid, where do you think they're going to want to go when their countries fall apart? Our little country, that's where they're going to want to go. And then people whose empathy is just weaponized to say we need to take all these people in and look after them because we're their parents. It's the right thing to do. Jesus would have done it. Not at the extent of actually creating poverty and social downfall in your own country. Jesus wouldn't have done that. Okay, just to conclude on this, well, the last couple of paragraphs are telling. Okay, so let me see. There's so many wrinkles in this thing now. She says, "You have no idea of what hordes look like." Sounds like Lord of the Rings, doesn't it? Well, it actually is now. If you walk around Cork City, it does look like hordes have invaded. So if you're one of these, and I have seen 12, 13 during last October, I saw 12, 13 Brazilian guys walking up the road in single file, wheeling suitcases behind them, and all speaking Portuguese. So I knew what was going on. And now I hear Portuguese everywhere around the city. I also see lots of Indian couples and Indian families. And as I said, there were 12,000 Brazilians last year, and 7,000 Indians that came into the country. So it says here. So if you're one of those people who find yourselves right, this is the last paragraph. See, look. Where is it? Let me get this right now. This last bit here, okay? She says, if you are one of those people who find yourself drawn to a rhetoric of hate and nonsense about Irish people being squeezed out by hordes of people coming here, I have two things to say. You have no idea what hordes look like. I've just said that I do. I'm living in Ireland in 2019. I do know what hordes look like. We are dealing with a trickle. So, secondly, what would you have people who have lost everything, their home and family, their previous lives do? I wouldn't have them do anything, because they are not my responsibility. I am not God. There is but one God. There is God Almighty, and it's in His will and in His realm and being that decides what happens there. I'm a human being. I'm not God. I don't have that kind of control. And I wouldn't put my own people at risk to actually try and solve the world's problems, which is what this is all about. Well, it's not really. There's more to it behind that. But we know that that's what they're using. They're using people's emotions, and especially feminized emotions, maternal instincts and empathy, in order to actually weaponize the Irish people against themselves and make them do something that they wouldn't otherwise normally do, which is give away their geographical location to people from other parts of the world. That's what this is about. No living creature would give up its hunting grounds and its mating grounds where its resources lie for its own well-being. No creature in the world would do that. Only human beings. And how and why would they do that? They do that when their feelings are weaponized and when they're tricked. And we're being tricked. So, secondly, what would you have people who have lost everything? Okay, what would you do if you were them, except try to build a life again somewhere else? Well, as I said previously, they have countries surrounding their countries. Why are they not going to those countries? Why are they actually skipping entire continents to actually get all the way up to little islands like Ireland? What's bringing them up here? Any idea? Right, let's keep going. Secondly, what would you have people do, right? What would you do if you were them? Maybe you should think on that when you're throwing a Nazi salute in a pathetic tribute to a genocidal regime. Now, the fact that she's saying that, and I know for a fact that the guy was a plant, and there are videos explicitly displaying that the guy was a plant. I know what she's about. I also know when she uses rhetoric, like, so if you find one of these people who find yourselves drawn to the rhetoric of hate. Now, you see, what's happening there is, that's rhetoric. She is using rhetoric to display, to lay bad behavior at the feet of people who weren't displaying bad behavior. Because I don't hate anybody. I know the people who are at the actual, the patriots who are standing outside of Google in support of Gemma O'Doherty, Anti-Corruption Ireland and the National Party. I know they don't have hate in their hearts. I have no hate. I have no hate towards anybody. And all of my previous videos show this. I have no hate towards anybody of any race, ethnicity, whatever. I have hate towards my own government. And I have hate towards the people who are causing this influx into my country for their own nefarious ends. Okay? I have hate for them. And I pray, I'm getting back my spirituality and my religion, and I pray to God to help me with that hate, because I don't want to hold that hate or anger as I see my country being transformed before my eyes, which this lady doesn't seem to see at all. but it's all rhetoric to make you feel a certain way, so they can do what they do. What I would suggest is that anybody who, I know it's almost impossible to actually find out a person's personal funds, but I'd love to know where she's getting funded from. I'd love to know who is giving her the financial impetus to actually do this to her own people. To use such rhetoric and weaponization of the Irish people's feelings against themselves, I would like to know what would cause an Irish person to do that. You know, it can't be blindness. She's saying we have a trickle of immigration. That's impossible. I mean, all you have to do is walk down any major city, or even some of the lesser ones around the country, and you see it's not a trickle. Like, we know this. We are being replaced. You know, 1/3 of social housing in Dublin is non-Irish. The same with student housing. Like, that's not Irish. So, like, sorry, my battery power just went down there. So it's like, if she, you know, she's not blind. She's a human being that can see and hear. Now, if she's ignoring what she's seeing and hearing to write this rhetoric, why is she doing that? And I would love to know if anybody can find out who she's being funded by. Who is actually paying this woman to be treasonous to her own people? That's what I would like to know. Okay, what are we at? 6 minutes. And maybe you should go, okay. So she says that even the horse. So if you find yourself one of those people drawn to the rhetoric of hate, again, who's hating? I don't hate Africans coming in here. I don't hate even all the Brazilians. I don't hate the Indians. I don't hate Polish. I don't hate any of them. So why does she say there is a rhetoric of hate? Do you understand? This is language that is being used against the Irish people. This is rhetoric. This is rhetoric. She is using rhetoric to actually impose the same, you know, supposition that the other side is using rhetoric of hate. It's ridiculous. So maybe you should think on that, and maybe you should go. Maybe you should do something to go, which is actually dealing with the issues you're just prattling about. Okay. So that's it. That's my bit said. Anybody who can find out where this lady's being funded from, I would be doing this country a favour. If anybody who knows her, find out where she's getting her finance from, find out where she's being funded from, and make that information public. Because this lady needs to be put to the test. This lady needs to be made transparent. And anybody who can do that would be a true patriot to their country, the country of Ireland, not to Ethiopia, to the country of Ethiopia, to the patriot to Ireland, okay? We are responsible for our own extended family, which is the Irish, first, within our borders, okay? We do have borders. I know our government signed away our borders in 2018, the Global Compact for Migration. Leo Varadkar signed that agreement, which is to make for the safe, orderly and regular migration of people from the third world into Europe and Ireland. And we have to advertise to them that they can come here and do that. That's another video, and I will do that one. Thank you.